Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, GCON.
The emperor, the conqueror, the champion, the lion is here. Hey! Zobu, zobu, when you die.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and welcome, much more than I deserve. I just want to alert you that as the keynote speaker, my speech is 20 minutes. So you'll be ready. I was given that time. Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, GCON, thank you for being here, for taking the time to come to Delta State. Your Excellency, Right Honorable Elder, I always wonder when I see that, because you're younger. Sheriff Oborewori, the governor, executive governor of Delta State, one of my really favorite people because he's action-oriented. Your Excellency, Professor Chukwuma Charles Soludo, so nice to see you here. Your Excellency, Samonde Onyeme, Deputy Governor, Delta State. Your Excellency, Senator Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa, immediate past governor of Delta State. Good to see you. Distinguished senators and members of the House of Reps, honorable ministers, especially the Minister of Finance, very nice to see you, one of my successors. Honorable commissioners of Delta State, the Secretary to the State Government, the chairman of the occasion, Engineer Austin Avuru, very nice of you to do this. And our royal fathers, very nice to see all of you. I think just give me half a minute to recognize one special royal father, who is my own younger brother, His Majesty, the Obi of Ogwashiukwu, Obi Ifechukwude Chukwuka Okonjo, and his chief of staff, my younger brother, Prince Onyema Okonjo. They came here to accompany me. Please give them a round of applause. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, it's always a joy to be back home in Delta State. And I brought with me one other honored Deltan. His name is Dr. Bright Okogu from Abraka, the former Director General of the Budget of the Federation, who is now the Chief of Staff of the WTO. I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to contribute to this conversation about realizing the development ambitions of Deltans. But as I rejoice with you, Your Excellency, I have to be very careful because you said I'm an export. So I've been exported to the WTO, but I was exported to Abia State first. And I have to acknowledge my husbands, because when they hear you, maybe Governor Alex Oti will lock me out of Abia State and I won't be able to go home. So I also want to salute my husbands in Abia State. I thank His Excellency, the Governor of Delta State, and the organizers of this summit for this invitation. I want to congratulate you, Excellency, on the development strides that you have been taking. He and I are often in touch. He's always WhatsApping me with one thing or the other. And the reason I came is because you take action. The fund you just announced of $100 million to de-risk investment is exactly the kind of things that we need. I also want to salute the investors, the development partners, captains of industry that are here, the entrepreneurs, the women entrepreneurs in particular, and the youth. And to thank the investors, especially the ambassador of Brazil and the delegation from Brazil, Malaysia, China, and others. What I'm going to do today in this keynote speech, which I've entitled The State as Harnessing Our Strengths and Unlocking Our Potentials for Economic Development, what I want to do is quickly look at the state of the world economy and global trade, not just because I'm DG of the WTO, but because it is the broadest context within which Delta State will pursue its goals. You all know that these are difficult times for the world and for global trade. On a daily basis, as far as trade is concerned, I face challenges on what is happening with global trade rules. The rules-based system that has framed global commerce for the past 80 years, since the end of the Second World War, is today under unprecedented strain. Unilateral tariff actions and rising geopolitical tensions have unsettled the economic environment within which countries and companies must make plans. Rapid technological change and climate shocks are further sources of pressure. And yet, despite all of these disruptions, trade and the trading system have shown remarkable resilience, contributing to the wider resilience of the global economy. The value of global goods and services trade last year was a record $34.65 trillion. In volume terms, world merchandise trade grew by 4.6% in 2025, with surging demand for AI-related goods more than compensating for weaknesses linked to tariff increases and trade policy uncertainty. African merchandise export volumes grew by 10.3%, driven by minerals, metals, fuels, and agricultural products like cocoa. Global services trade grew by 5.3% and by nearly 6% for digitally delivered services trade. The takeaway from all of these numbers is that within the global disruption, there is a stable core, and that despite all the tough headlines that you keep seeing, there are opportunities for Delta State, for Nigeria, and for Africa. That's the case I want to make to you today. These opportunities were not available even 10 or 15 years ago. The question to me is whether we will move to seize these opportunities or whether the opportunities will go elsewhere. In recent years, particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic, it has become clear that a world economy designed for interdependence is now marked by some troubling overdependencies. Overdependence on the US for digital services and final market demand, overdependence on China for critical minerals, and the weaponization of some of these overdependencies is swelling anxiety, resentment, and a desire for diversification. And that is why the word diversification here repeated in Delta State is very appropriate and timely. The resulting push by companies and governments to reduce exposure to geopolitical and other risks by deconcentrating supply chains is an opportunity for what we at the WTO are calling re-globalization, making global value chains more resilient to shocks by attracting more investment to places like Nigeria and to Delta State that have been on the margins of the global distribution of labor. Alongside the potential for re-globalization are a related set of opportunities on the continent that it has created for itself. The African Continental Free Trade Area, with its prospect for a 1.4 billion person strong unified market, common standards, and joined-up infrastructure, makes the continent a more attractive investment destination, both for companies targeting African markets and for those seeking to make Africa a base for exporting to the rest of the world. Seizing these two sets of opportunities, the desire for diversification and deconcentration of global supply chains, and the desire to seize the opportunity of the African Continental Trade Area is what we are talking about. It's at the heart of what I think Delta State should be thinking about in its growth and development strategy. Somebody said, think beyond Nigeria, think outside, and that's what we are also trying to say. I'm convinced that Delta State has the ingredients to become Nigeria's next great industrial hub. That's what I wish for it as a daughter of Delta. Standing alongside Lagos, Kano, and Port Harcourt as an engine of the national economy. The emergence of a new growth pole here in Delta State would be good for Nigeria as a whole. It would help decongest some of our economic hubs like Lagos and Kano that are becoming overcrowded. Lagos alone accounts for around a quarter of Nigeria's GDP and half of its non-oil GDP. Consider Delta's natural, infrastructural, and human endowments. We've heard about them. Abundant natural gas, a coastline with seaports at Warri, Sapele, Bruto, and Escravos, the Takwe-Ajiokuta-Warri rail line, the fertile land of Delta State, solid minerals, 49 tertiary institutions producing young people who want opportunities in the state where they grew up. On the financial front, the state also has some fiscal space. Budget's 2025 State of States report ranks Delta 6th of 35 states in overall fiscal performance and 2nd in debt sustainability. I was very happy about that. And when I heard one of the speakers say, you're not going to borrow from anyone dead or alive, I was smiling. Keep the fiscal prudence, because without it, you're not going to be able to build the Delta State we want. If you have to deploy resources, you have to deploy them in a manner that makes the state productive, not wasted. The 2026 proposed budget of 1.664 trillion naira prioritizes increased capital expenditures as part of the efforts to move Delta onto a higher growth path. A stable macroeconomic environment at the federal level on exchange rate management, bringing down inflationary pressures, would improve states' prospects for success. And we have heard the Minister of Finance and the central bank governor, I was with him a few days ago, talk about the progress that is being made, and that's moving in the right direction. But the fact is that endowments alone do not add value. Budgetary allocations alone do not lead to new roads, to good maintenance. We lack a maintenance culture in the country. I have to say that I'm Nigerian, and I was telling Engineer Austin Avuru, thanking him for mentioning maintenance. We need that. We need better ports and digital infrastructure and lower trade costs. Execution is what matters. And successful execution requires focus. It requires prioritization. So let me touch on a few priority areas for focused investment. We've listened to Delta State, and the one or two things I have to say seem to coincide. The Delta State's government focus on developing the special economic zones makes sense. In fact, a new report by the World Bank on industrial policy specifically identifies special economic zones as one of the best available tools for governments with limited fiscal space and bandwidth and relatively small local markets. Governments can improve infrastructure and regulatory frameworks for a specific location, which in turn allows for the pooling of labor, inputs, and ideas. With Delta State's gas assets that we've heard about, and working with the federal government, this is key, working with the federal government, you have an important ingredient for the essential infrastructure. Because elements of a successful industrial park include 24/7 infrastructure, meaning electricity, roads, rail, water, and IT connectivity, together with on-site support for licensing and other aspects of regulatory compliance, you need the federal government's full support for what you're doing. I've not had the chance to visit the Delta Special Economic Zones in Kwale and Koko, but I know they have been under consideration for years, and we saw in the movie that something is happening. But I also would encourage you to visit a couple of other special economic zones around us. I visited the Lekki Free Zone just 2 days ago, and the deep sea port. And what is happening there, it started while I was Minister of Finance. And what is happening there is worth seeing. Phase by phase, they are working and they are developing the area. There are 5,000 people employed there now. I also think that the Glo-Jigbe Special Economic Zone in the Republic of Benin is well worth a visit. I was there, and what struck me was a large number of young men and women, graduates and people coming out of secondary school who were employed in the various industries on site. The park runs like clockwork, meaning everything works, everything is on site. They don't need to go anywhere to do anything. And that is the kind of special economic zone that we would like to see. I don't know if Afrexim Bank is here or Arise, some of the investors there, but I think that what I saw them doing there is good testimony to what can be done elsewhere and done here, right here in Delta State. In tandem with the development of the special economic zone, another priority would be to identify a small number of value chains. Again, it was said at the beginning, areas where you have strong comparative advantage, and they are there. We've talked about agro-allied processing, but there you have listed a number of crops. Which 2 or 3 are you going to prioritize? That's my question to you. Because if we go into so many, we dissipate the amount of capital and resources we have. So I would ask you to focus on 2 or 3 that are likely to do well. And you've mentioned several of them. It's not only about the 2 or 3, but we have to go all the way from the production all the way up the value chain, ensuring standards, quality, access to finance, access to markets. This is what trade is about. It doesn't start just when you have the product. It starts even when you start to produce the product. So I strongly encourage you to identify 1 or 2, 3 crops, no more, focus on those and take those along the value chain. Second, the blue economy. Delta's coastline and rivers have been mentioned. They have the potential to support aquaculture parks, fish landing sites, jetties, and cold rooms. Nigeria imports on average 573,388 metric tons of fish and fish products, worth $866 million, almost $1 billion a year. We import that. Can Delta State become the blue economy hub to capture that market, meet the demand? Imagine if we could import substitute for the $1 billion, almost $1 billion we're spending in importing fish into the country. And if I can say something blunt here, building a blue economy is not about letting trawlers come in and fish off your coast. That's not what I'm talking about. Actually, at the World Trade Organization, we have a new agreement that talks about how to reduce this phenomenon, because our coasts are fished with these trawlers, robbing the small fishermen and women of access to fisheries. So that's not what I'm talking about. We have a grant now with the Nigerian government to assess our fisheries management capacity, and I hope that Delta State can become part of that. It's being managed by the Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research, along, of course, with the Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Investment. So please find out about it and see if we can make you part of the assessment for the potential for your marine fisheries. In addition to the fisheries, the state's seaports, export terminals, and commercial centers provide a base for port services, ship repair, and marine logistics. The question is, what investment is needed in these ports or marine services to enable Delta State to take better advantage of this natural endowment? So this is the kind of development that would make for very good jobs for our young people. Turn Delta State into a marine logistics hub. So that's the other request I have for you. turn it into a marine logistics and ship repair hub. And finally, the third area is in oil and gas. Yes, we've spoken about this. That's what the state is known for. But we've heard, even in the oil and gas, we've got work to do. We've got to improve pipeline connectivity. You have to work with the federal government to get gas to these other areas. If you make the special economic zones, the gas has to be piped there so it can actually work. You have people who want to generate power for the state, but if they don't get the gas, they will not be able to do that. You want to develop a solid minerals industry, and we've got what it takes in silica, kaolin, and other things, but they all need the gas to be properly piped to where it's needed. And finally, on digital infrastructure and AI. We haven't spoken much about that, but this is where the world is going. The world trade itself is going digital. So in all the developments you do here, I want to strongly encourage you that connectivity to take advantage of the digital economy is essential. I would like you to also see how that can be prioritized. Our young people are all on the internet. Our women are trading digitally, but they need the connectivity to make all of this work. So, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, I've sketched out the opportunities awaiting Delta State, and they're rather exciting. What you have to decide now is how to deploy your capital. You've spoken about it, Your Excellency, but I think there's still work to be done in terms of prioritizing what you want to do. But I'm optimistic. I'm a Delta State optimist. I'm also a Nigeria optimist. We have the confluence of three windows of opportunity: the global push for supply diversification, the African continental integration, and within Nigeria, the recognition that economic transformation will not come from Abuja alone. The Minister of Finance talked about that. That sub-national governments will have to step up, as you are doing, Excellency, to create jobs, attract investment, and provide public goods. The prize-winning Delta author Ben Okri famously wrote, and I quote, "Don't neglect the gold in your own backyard," unquote. The true wealth of Delta State has never just been our oil and gas, it's our people. This summit is about taking care of the gold in our backyard, of starting the years of hard work needed to deliver on our people's hopes and aspirations for better lives, on demonstrating that Delta can and will compete for investment and become the industrial hub for Nigeria that I want it to be. Delta can and will transform itself from a resource-rich state to a diversified, inclusive, and resilient sub-national economy. Excellency, dear Governor, Mr. Vice President, my fellow Deltans, I just want to wish all of us perseverance and success.
Please, whilst you're standing, can you bring the roof down with your applause for this diminutive